please take the time to turn off your cell phones because every once in a while we'll get like strange music or Giles theme playing during an interview. But you guys, I'm super excited that you're here. Let me know back there. Okay, good to go? All right, we're going to do this thing. I'm so excited to introduce this creator to you on our Secret Origins series. You may know her from her work doing manga translation, but you probably know her for comics like Ghost at Dark Horse, for Captain Marvel's great relaunch at Marvel, for Avengers Assemble and the upcoming creator-owned work, Pretty Deadly. Please welcome Kelly Sue DeConnick. Because we have long hair, sometimes I'm really like to apologize in advance. The serious class.
Yes, I feel like we should have wow, that is powerful.
I know, but it does feel it's empowering. I feel like I should be doing the Oprah, the tented hands.
Yeah. It's a little embarrassing because I have nothing intelligent to say.
Don't worry.
No, it's really true.
You will, and we're going to start out, just because this is the Secret Origins panel, just very quickly, what sort of broke you into comics? I know a little bit about the manga work. Was that the first thing that you were paid to do in comics?
No, the first thing I was paid to do in comics was to write reviews for a site called artbomb.net. And it was founded by myself, Peter Rose, and Warren Ellis. And then Matt Fraction joined us before we launched. So I think he's an honorary founder, but I just want you to know he wasn't at the table at the beginning, okay? And Peter had a investor that paid for it. So it was a great site because we wrote, they weren't really reviews, they were sort of recommendations. So we just talked about the books that we wanted you to read. And we didn't cover any superhero stuff, not because we didn't love superheroes, but because those are the books that didn't need our help.
Right.
So it was just broad genre stuff, and it was categorized by genre. And the idea was to organize an online recommendation room that was like shelved the way a bookstore would be shelved. So you know, like, I want to read a romance. Let's go to the romance section, and here are, like, if it was on the site, we like it. You know?
Nice.
So it was nice, yeah, and it was sort of like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything,
right.
Which was lovely. So.
Well, in light of that, I'm just curious. Obviously, your criticism was positive, but did that ever give you any trepidation when you started writing your own stuff? Because sometimes the transition from being sort of a critical analysis of other people's work to doing your own can put up a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah, I didn't, because I had never been in a position of saying, you know, well, so-and-so could work a little bit on their blah,
right.
blah, blah. Yeah, I never really had to deal with any of that.
Cool.
But I know from a creator side, I really don't take that stuff too personally. So, I mean, occasionally when somebody writes something that's personal, then, you know, that bugs me. But mostly I just feel sorry for them because they're jealous.
Well, talk a little bit about the manga work and the translation and.
That happened. That was sort of hilarious. Like, okay, how can I tell this in a concise way? I've only been telling this story for 10 years. You'd think I had it figured out. So I went to a bookstore signing for Neverwhere. And I was super nervous at the front of the line, and I didn't say anything very smart. And then later I was like, damn it! So I wrote a note to Gaiman and gave it to the bookstore owner and was like, would you give this to Mr. Gaiman, please? And he was like, yeah, I'll put it with the rest. And I was like, well, that was awesome for me. And but my note was like very professional. It was like, you know, I'm a writer and I have done research and assistant work for other writers, and I know that you do not live in New York, but that you are in New York frequently, and if you ever need an assistant in New York, I would be pleased to send you my CV and resume. And I was about 6 weeks, I didn't hear anything, and you know, you figured, well, I gave that a shot.
Right.
And I got an email from Neil Gaiman, and it was like, and he was like, I happen to have an amazing assistant, and I don't need an assistant in New York, but it was a pleasure to meet you. He remembered me, bizarrely, and then we had a super polite correspondence that you know, I was always very aware of, like, you know, don't make it too long, and don't, you know, and then for a while, and then at some point he wrote me something, and like on a time when I was having a very bad day, and like my judgment went out of the window, and he was like, how are you? And I was like, oh, it sucks every day. And I think at that point he kind of became a friend, and we corresponded a bit more after that, and he sent some of my poetry to Jonathan Carroll, and then asked me to do a couple bits of research for him on American Gods. Very small stuff, but I told everyone I know. And because of that, I had worked with Neil Gaiman, which is sort of true. And then Tokyo Pop was looking for someone to do the English adaptation of a book called Demon Diary. And Princess Mononoke had just come out, and they wanted a Neil Gaiman feel. Right. And so Jamie Rich was like, hey, my friend Kelly Sue worked with Neil Gaiman. And I was like, yes, I did. And so then I did a tryout, a few pages of adaptation. They liked it. I got that gig, then work begets work, and 7 years later, I had done something like 11,000 pages of manga adaptation. Wow. So, yeah.
What would, and we won't stay on this topic much longer, but I'm curious what the sort of biggest either challenge or surreal, hilarious moment of that era was.
Probably two things. One, the only time I ever actually had like an antagonistic relationship with because I don't speak Japanese. My Japanese is just the tiniest bit polite Japanese, but so I worked with translators who were amazing, wonderful people, and particularly this guy Joe that I worked with on a lot of books. Like, I was super fond of him. He was great, and I think he was like a punk rock drummer in San Francisco or something. I was like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. But there was one guy I worked with on some Slayers novelizations who was great, and you know, but you get territorial about your stuff, and I felt like he was sort of trying to do my job for me, because he was doing, in some of the translation, he was doing some of the adaptation, including he cut the fart jokes. And I know, right? I was like, you do not protect me from fart jokes. I will make those calls. That is my job. So that was probably the weirdest thing, that I was like having a fight with my editor about fart jokes, and that there was nothing like, oh no, we leave the rape jokes in, but we cut the fart jokes, you know? It was like, no, I'm not okay with this. But, so there was that. And then, trying to do the transliterations of sound effects are hilarious. I'm not good at this in English much. I literally sit at my desk and go like, you know, like, and so trying to do that with Japanese, where what I would get in the translation wasn't the sound effects, but I would get like a thing in brackets that said sound of, and my favorite was sound of wearing hat. So, yeah, it was like, okay, like putting hat on perhaps, but sound of wear, like, unless the hat has bells, I'm not sure what, like, and it was like a little bowler. It was like sound of wearing hat.
Did you eventually find out what the sound of where, was it like a FWPP or FOOP?
I think I just decided it's got to be sound of having hat on, or putting hat on, you know, so it was like, you know, it was a trip.
So how did you bridge the gap from going to writing?
So my first original English comic writing work was co-writing 30 Days of Night, Even and Stella with Steve Niles. And why Steve decided I would be a good choice for this, I have no idea. We knew each other from the internet, and he was like, he liked my work. He'd sent me some stuff to read. I'd sent him some stuff to read, and he was like, hey, you want to co-write this book with me? I won't get in your way. We'll just, you know, keep me in the loop, and I'll check your outlines, and it'll be great. You're going to do wonderful. I was like, oh! And yeah, and it happened. So.
And did you feel like you sort of got to do what you wanted to do with that book, and even though it was a co-writing experience?
Yeah, totally. He was super great about it. Every co-writing experience I have had has been really good. Like I'd tell you if it wasn't, but genuinely, you know, sincerely, it really has been. But I'm not super proud of my like comics writing aspect of that book. Like there's times when I'm like, oh yeah, pacing is not a thing I still have figured out, I'll be honest with you, but pacing was not a thing I really had figured out very much in the beginning. But like, I'm proud of the prose, I'm proud of the themes. The character of Jen that I created for that book, I was like, yeah, she's cool, she's scary, I like her. So.
That's really cool. Well, only because, you know, obviously Steve created 30 Days Night, so I'm sure there's sometimes trepidation when it's not just that you're working with another writer on someone else's property, you're working with the guy that made the property. Yeah,
right? You'd think. I would be crazy fanatical about that, but he's not. He's super generous.
Steve's really mellow.
Yeah, he really, really is. So I don't know what was up with that, but
cool.
Hey, I know.
And so that led to...
So that led to, like, I did small anthology stuff after that, and then my big, I had a baby. Which is disruptive to your everything.
It is time-consuming.
Yes, it is, and also I have this tendency to freak out about things, and babies are a thing that it's easy to freak out about, and I just had like this real identity deal after Henry was born, and I went from doing like literally I was doing 5 manga adaptations a month, 200-page adaptations.
Wow.
So I went from doing 5 a month to doing 1 a month. It was a real, like, I don't know, it was just a like trying to figure out like who am I as a mom, and you know, my feminine identity, and you know, all of that stuff. I mean, it sounds corny, and I'm making fun of it, but it was a real thing. So I didn't work a lot in the first couple years of Henry's life, and then I did keep up with the adaptations. And then Marvel was doing the Women of Marvel initiative.
Right.
And Alejandro Arbona asked my husband, Matt Fraction, if he could think of anybody. They were looking to have all female teams on these books, and they wanted somebody to do rescue. And Matt was like, well, my wife, is that a problem? And there was a lot of like, we don't know if that's a problem. Let's check and see if that's a problem. And so what they did was they had me send a copy of Even and Stella to Ralph Macchio, who was the supervising editor on it, and didn't tell Ralph that I was married to Matt. And so Ralph read the book, then that got me the pitch. I pitched actually on Rescue and on Sif. I got both books, and then we told Ralph, oh, hey, I'm married to Fraction, is that a deal? And because we wanted to, if it was going to be a problem for him, we wanted to give him an out so that he would still have time to give somebody else the book. And he thought it was funny. He didn't think it was a problem at all. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Had Girl Comics, the anthology, come out before that, or was that after?
That was after.
Sif? Okay,
so
gotcha.
I can't remember which was first, Rescue or Sif. And
I think
then
Rescue was first.
girl comics, and then a whole bunch of little, you know, a Coppelia, a Black Widow story, and then like the three latest stories, and a few one-shots here and there. And then I finally got to pitch on, well, I did the
Osborn,
Osborn,
right?
yeah, the Osborn mini with Emma Rios, and then I got to pitch on Captain Marvel, which when I was pitching on it was Ms. Marvel.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you, back up really quickly to girl comics. I remember when that anthology came out, it was interesting because on one side people were extremely excited that there was an anthology that was getting, you know, people like, I think it was like Colleen Coover and just tons of people more exposure. There was some weird trepidation about the title because, you know, there sort of wasn't an anthology called like Boy Comics.
Yeah, and it's so, I don't have any of this sorted in my head, honestly. I have mixed feelings about all of it. You know, on the one hand, like, you know, it's like, oh, there's an all-female anthology. Yeah, you guys know there's been an all-female anthology every year since, like I'm not kidding you, since like 1978 or something. Like, so you can go back on Wikipedia and find all of, like, you know, sexy chicks. Like, there's, you know, there's been at least one a year every year. And I don't know what they accomplish. On the other hand, having one, you know, anthologies are always, by their nature, like wildly inconsistent. There's like really high quality stuff and stuff that you're like, oh, okay. And at the same time, it got, you know, I don't know. Who am I to say? Like, you know, exposure is exposure, and there was, I did like I liked girl comics as a.
It sounded fun. I mean, I will say my initial impression was fun.
Yeah.
And I don't have an opinion about it either. I just know that there was a tremendous amount of bandwidth taken up with that issue.
Yeah. The woman who put it together that spearheaded it is Janine Schaefer, and I could not love Janine more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like Janine is she loves comics, and she is she's fantastic, and she's smart, and she wanted to do this. And like the cover with the She-Hulk arm wrestling thing, I was like, yeah, you know. So.
Well, now, up next, you did Osborn, and I think it's really interesting because I feel like there's this sort of weird thing, and some of it's probably projected, but that it's, girl comics and then SIF, and it's sort of nice to be like, it doesn't matter. We have male writers that write female characters. It's not a big deal. Was it nice to get a chance to just go, now this issue is moot? Yeah,
and it was hilarious too because Steve Wacker called me to ask me if I wanted to do it, and he was like, I know you ladies like to write ladies, and I was like, okay, I love you, because he was just making fun of the whole thing. He's like, yeah, this is gonna be dudes in prison. You up for it? And I was like, yeah. So, yeah, you know, Steve's great. Steve's got a daughter, and Steve's like we were talking about Carol Danvers in the beginning, what we wanted from it, and it was like, yeah, if she never sits on the couch eating ice cream in the entire run, however much we get, we will have won, you know? Like,
well, so let's talk about the transition from Ms. Marvel to Captain Marvel, the suit that it was oddly swimming apparel like to the more military suit, the haircut, the whole transition. How much of that were you involved in? All of it, down to the design issues? You know, what point did you come in, and did you pitch on it initially? So
when I pitched on Ms. Marvel.
Gotcha.
And I was so amazed that anyone might entertain giving me an ongoing that I was like, we're going to do it exactly the way it is, you know, and then Steve was the one that was really pushing for it. And in fact, I've told this story 100 times, but when he called me to tell me that I'd finally gotten the book, he was like, well, you're not writing Ms. Marvel. And I was like trying to be cool about it, and I was like, oh, okay, that's all right, you know, you win some, you lose some, it's all right. And he was like, 'cause you're writing Captain Marvel. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then he was the one that was like, and as long as we're gonna do this, I think that we should give her a new costume, and I think we should put her in pants. And I wrote him back, and I was like, I can't tell if you're kidding. No idea. So the part of it that I had was that I fought for Jamie McKelvey to do it. I've never told this story publicly before, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get in trouble. So this will be exciting. But McKelvey, we took a real risk doing that. Like they were not going to go with outside budget for the redesign, and I was like, well, what if I, and this is so stupid because I don't have this money, but I was like, what if I paid for the redesign? What if like I went out of pocket and had McKelvey do a design? And so it was like, if you guys didn't want to pay for it, then it would be paid for, and it was like this really weird thing where they're like, okay, well, and so it was like, well, I don't know that we could do that, but if McKelvey happened to do a design and I happened to see it and get it right at the front of people, we might be able to purchase it. Like it was this really weird, like,
wow.
And so I talked to Jamie and it was like, I kind of want you to make a bet with me, and I don't know, and it's totally okay if you don't want to do this. And he was like, let's bring it, let's do it. And Jamie did this design that was perfect and beautiful, and to me, it looks like the superhero branch of the military, and supposedly the deal was that like I would be paying for it if Marvel didn't buy it, but I don't think he probably would have held me to that. I don't know. But yeah, he did it basically on spec.
Wow.
And then they made it happen.
That's almost like doing a creator-owned comic together, because so much of that process is, the artist and the writer sort of forgo anything up front. If anything, the writer is probably trying to help finance it, and then you hope and pray that someone likes it enough to.
Yeah, it was a weird, like I had tummy aches about it. I was really nervous about it.
I've never heard of anything like that, but it's amazing.
Yeah, so it was really cool. I hope I don't get fired for sharing that with you.
Please do not. No firings, please.
So, but yeah, it was really nice. I think it. There's no bad guy in the story. I shouldn't get fired. There was no it wasn't in the budget,
Right.
and so they were trying to go the safest route with it, and Jamie took a chance, and Steve fought for him, and they made it happen. So it was really cool.
Well, I would argue that those changes from Ms. Marvel to Captain Marvel, of the costume, of everything else, generated a tremendous amount of interest. So I think, you could say it's a loss leader.
Yeah, I'm very careful to. Look, I love Dave Cockrum, and the old costume is classic and it is iconic. It was just outdated, and it didn't. Today, when we do so much live superhero stuff in the movies and whatnot, and we see people at cons walking around in these costumes, we conceptualize it in a way that we didn't at that time.
Right.
They're more human, and in real life, the swimsuit and thigh boots. And I knew I was going to be writing a funeral scene. Who's going to a military funeral in a swimsuit and thigh boots? And it was, it was odd. It's that may have been sort of, and I believe it comes out of a gymnastics tradition. Okay, not the thigh boots. I don't know what the thigh boots. Well, I do really, but the thigh boots and the opera gloves. I know what that is. I have children. But yeah, it just didn't play for us in a contemporary setting for someone who had a military background and is pretty practical. Carol's a pretty practical chick.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense, and I just couldn't see her showing up at Helen's funeral with her butt cheeks hanging out.
Right. This is it's something that just occurred to me, but do you think now that we're in an era where we're seeing characters like, for example, the Black Widow on the big screen, that companies are sort of more open to for lack of a better word, a practical redesign of costumes. You know, we saw the X-Men in the Grant Morrison run, you know, back in the day with Frank Whiteley in the black suits that were similar to the ones from the movies, because there's now this expectation that, hey, this could go to the big screen and it's suddenly Wonder Woman. It's like, maybe she should have a bolero jacket and pants, because it seems like...
You know, I do think that that's a part of it, and I think cosplay is a part of it too. You know, I think when we see this on real human beings, and we start to conceptualize it in a way that we hadn't previously,
Right.
then it's like, oh, not so much.
Right.
You know, like when we were working on Ghost, like I love the old Adam Hughes Ghost corset and thing. I was like, yeah, it's super cool. And super crazy dated, you know, and like, did she die at a rave? What? Like, you know, like seriously, why with the thing? And that she was a journalist, right? Who with the REO speak? No, you know. So it was cool. It worked at the time. It was dated. No shame in that. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it was of a time.
Yes.
You know.
Well, speaking of Ghost, you know, obviously you were doing Ghost stuff with Phil Noto. Is he involved in because I believe the big announcement yesterday was that it's being picked up as an ongoing at Dark Horse.
Yes, it is being picked up as an ongoing at Dark Horse. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And I wish issue 4 was out right now so we could talk about how that arc ended and what that sets up for how it's going to go on, because it's really clever. But it's not out, so I suck. But the team has not been announced yet, which you could take to assume, you know,
right.
Clearly. But so.
Well, let me ask you, for people who are only familiar with your Marvel work, kind of pitch Ghost so that people are up to speed, if there are people watching online or in the audience who aren't as familiar with that.
Okay, it is, so there's these two dudes. You can tell I've not done this before. We'll see how this goes. I should have elevator pitches for all of my books, and I really don't, so I'm a pro. There's these two dudes, and they have a late-night ghost hunter cable television show. And one of them is Vaughn, and one of them is Tommy. And Tommy's kind of a trust fund kid, and Tommy is like a true believer, and Tommy's kind of an idiot. But he has a really big heart. Tommy is probably a better person than Vaughn is. Vaughn is very smart. Vaughn is the skeptic. Vaughn is he was a journalist. He was a disgraced journalist because Vaughn got scared and crawled into a bottle and left his ethics in there. And so he lost his job, he lost his marriage. He ended up working on this show with Tommy, and he kind of hates himself, and he hates Tommy, and he treats Tommy like crap, and Tommy puts up with it because he sees something in Vaughn. And Tommy wants to be the guy that finds the thing that proves that ghosts are real and that the soul persists after crosses the curtain or whatever. And so he's always buying like this magnometer and then it does this and that means stuff, you know. And so Tommy gets this new machine through this back channel, and they take it to this cemetery, which I actually went to in Justice outside of Chicago, to see if they can find Resurrection Mary, which is one of the most famous ghosts in Chicago. And they plug it in, and holy crap, a screaming wraith in white comes out of the sky, and then they unplug it and she disappears. And it's like, you know, oh my God, we have evidence of this. And he believes that, hey, you know, I've made this happen. And he like calls a press conference, and, you know, like 6 dudes show up. And it doesn't, no one still believes him, even with evidence. And then that Vaughn kind of doesn't want to believe it, and sort of starts messing with the machine and passes out with it on and pulls this woman into our world. So the 0 issue tells the story of her coming into the world from Vaughn's perspective, with Mon as the protagonist. And then with the issue 1, we take over from the woman's perspective. And so we're going to come to discover in those 4 issues where she came from. Is she in fact dead? Who she was previous to this shift. And since I already spoiled this, she was a journalist. And part of my going into this was reading about a woman whose last name I can't pronounce because it's Russian and very long. It's Anna Polutskaya. And she was an amazing and brave woman, and like a real life superhero, someone who spoke truth to power, and she was murdered on Putin's birthday, probably as a gift. And this was about, this book is about those people who are real heroes, who put themselves out for the rest of us. And well, that's the genesis of her character anyway, and sort of contrasting her with Vaughn, who didn't have the courage to do that. And then Vaughn's journey is him sort of finding a way to make himself a better man. And then at the end of it, we find out, at the end of the 4 issues, we find out where she was in the time that she was gone, and what she has found out about Chicago, and what her mission is now. So
cool.
dun, dun, dun.
So you are juggling quite a few books, including now Avengers Assemble, correct?
Yes, Avengers Assemble.
So team book dynamics, that's sort of for some people can be a real challenge. Do you like sort of writing the ensemble?
I really, really do. I think I tend to write with a kind of novelistic structure. So I like being able to cut away to. That's the hardest thing for me about writing Carol Danvers. Is pretty much in the Captain Marvel book, we're always with Carol Danvers,
right.
And that's sort of hard for me in structuring the story. It's like I always want to be able to skip time by cutting to these different scenes, and it's hard for me to do when you stay with that one character all the time. I just find it awkward, and so I like very much with Avengers Assemble being able to kind of like, and now we're here, and now we're here, and now we're here, and also they're just such a great cast, and they're such iconic characters, and it's really fun, and I wanted to kind of match the tone of the film, of the Whedon film, and so it's like it's got the AC/DC thing happening, but it's like I hope it's funny. It's meant to be funny.
Right.
And the first arc is fairly ludicrous, but the second arc, issue 12 and 13. 13's not out yet, but it's probably. I'm always proud of my character work, but I feel like the things I've been trying to work on, I've been trying to learn to write for my artists. I've been really focusing on that. I think I've gotten better at that this year. Pacing and plot structure, and then like making the most of the form are the 3 things that I'm really, really working on. And I always feel like my character work is good and my dialogue is solid, and my humor is good, but my plots don't come together as well as I'd like them to. And the 12-13 issue arc on Avengers Assemble, I was like, well, wasn't it that tidy? 40 pages. So I hope you like it, because now I'm going to look like a jackass.
Well, I mean, you're obviously getting to play in the Marvel sandbox. Are there characters you haven't gotten to write yet at Marvel or elsewhere at other companies that are established and owned elsewhere that you'd love to write?
Yeah, totally. I'm usually like really sketchy about answering this question, because you have this thing where you're like, first of all, if it's a character that's nobody's doing anything with,
right.
You don't want to remind other writers who have more time than you do right now,
right.
that like, hey, that character's out there in somebody's desk drawer,
Right.
And then the other thing too is like, if somebody else is writing the character and doing it really well, you don't want it to sound like, hey, I want your job, you know?
That makes total sense.
But like, I'm gonna get to write Wasp coming up,
Oh,
right?
phenomenal.
Like, how
That's
fun
awesome.
is that? So I totally wanted to write her, and so I'm going to get to write her. And then, you know, I grew up reading DC. So I got to do 3 issues of Supergirl for DC, the last 3 issues before the New 52 rebooted. And so it was like, this might be my one chance to write Lois Lane, so I know it's a Supergirl book. Guess who she's teaming up with? Because I'm going to write her before I die, and just in case I blow this, she's going to be in it. So.
You also have a creator-owned book coming up, Pretty Deadly, and that's with Emma Rios, correct? Who you worked with on Osborne.
Yes, yeah, right? If you guys want to come by my booth, I have sneak peek pages of it you can see.
Go to Kelly Sue DeConnick's booth.
J13.
So tell us a little bit about that book and your decision to wade into the waters of creator-owned comics.
Yeah. Wow. So my husband writes a creator. He's done several creator-owned books, but his first love creator-owned book is this book called Casanova. And he is always sort of thrashing about and miserable when he's writing Casanova. And like we would go, I have memories of one particular sushi dinner where I was like, "Hi, hello, I'm your wife sitting across from you at the table. Do you want to just talk about the book since you're not here?" You know, and it's all right. We stayed married. It's all right. But like it is a real. He talks about it taking like 6 times longer to write than anything else, and it just being this like weird, painful process for him. And I just kind of thought, tortured artists. And now I owe him huge apologies because Pretty Deadly is the hardest thing I've ever written in my life. Every time I think I know what it's about or where it's going, it changes on me, and it's a weird book. I tend to write things that are very contemporary, and humor is a big part of my work, and you know, and it's shockingly dark. I think it's dark in a way that I was like, wow, okay, I didn't mean to go there, but you know, all right. And it has I didn't know that it had a supernatural element to it. Totally has a supernatural element to it. Which, I mean, when you say things like that, you sound like a crazy person. But there is like this process of discovery in your writing that is both great and super weird. That, like, oh, this character isn't who I thought she was, and she isn't, and all of my insistence to try and force her in this direction, it's just not working, and she's not having it, and I don't have control over that, which makes you sound like you have aspirations to be Grant Morrison, or you've lost it. But it is a beautiful book. Emma Rios is amazing, and she can draw the darkest, grossest things and make them super beautiful. Jordi Belair is on colors. Dustin Harbin is going to be lettering. We have an amazing team, and the book is about it's about the Devil's Daughter, and a blind man who may or may not actually be blind, and a girl who wears a vulture coat. You know, like you do. And it's narrated by a dead bunny.
Well, it is interesting because with, you know, if you're doing a book at Marvel, if you're doing a book at DC, there are parameters. You can't say, I'm going to do a Daredevil story and Matt Murdock dies at the end, and also it's revealed that he and Foggy have been very close for the last. You can't do that. That is not something that you're able to do. With the creator-owned work, you are essentially the god of your universe. If you go, I'm going to kill off my main character, you can do it.
Yeah.
And in a way, not having any parameters can be more difficult than having very confined ones.
Yeah, you know, I was an actor for years, and I was never an actor who worked well with those directors who were like, you know, no, hey, whatever you want to do it. I was like, no, you tell me, you get from here to here on this line. I will decide whether I'm doing a cartwheel to get there, but you know, give me something. I wasn't. I didn't like in plays and stuff. In improv, it's different, but I never liked, like, I wanted a director who blocked,
right?
You know, and I think that I do have a weird thing where I feel, I don't think it's that weird. I think it's fairly common actually. I feel more creative when I know where the boundaries are. Like, so when you take all of that away, and it's like, hey, here's what you're doing, you know. And again, there are things where you're like, oh, I think I understand where the boundaries are. I think this is a Western. I think it is about an assassin and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And, you know, and I had this whole thing where this is a circus. But no, turns out not even in the book. Like, you know, like it was like, oh, there was a point at which I realized I had to cut a whole aspect of it that had been a big part of why I liked the book and why I wanted to do the book and everything that it was about. It was like, oh, that doesn't actually belong here. You're trying to force this in. It was a very like kill your darlings moment,
right.
And it was weird. It was intensely weird. And
is the book ongoing, or is it a limited?
Well, we have a 5-issue
arc for the first part.
Yeah, and then it was never intended to be ongoing. But Emma and I've gotten into this weird place, and she's like, you know, financially, if we can ongoing, well, let's talk.
Right.
So we'll see how it does. It's intensely weird book. It is very possible that like 6 of you will like it, you know.
Right.
And we'll do 5 issues, and that'll be that. But it, you know, it's weird. It's very weird. And it's very adult. That was another thing too. I was like, oh hey, nudity. Ha! Didn't know that was coming. So.
You would not have that in Captain Marvel.
No, not so much with it. And it's tonally, it's wildly different. Wildly different. Although there was one, I keep interrupting.
Oh, no, go.
There was a thing in, I have been super lucky with, nobody has told me. I think people have this perception that working for DC and Marvel, that they're much more like, you can do this and you can't do this, than they actually are. They really want you to do crazy stuff. There one thing have I not gotten to do, which is with that initial arc, I had wanted to I'd wanted to change Carol's origin. So that, you know, it goes back to, spoilers, it goes back to the moment of her origin when the psychic magnetron blows up and the powers of Mar-Vell are transferred to Carol Danvers. And when we revisited it, then contemporary Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, was there with also Helen Cobb, her hero. Well, the way I was going to have it in my first draft was that instead of Mar-Vell holding Carol, as had happened the first time, Mar-Vell would be holding Helen, and Carol would be holding Carol, so that so symbolically she would sort of become her own mother. She would be the source of her own powers, which was kind of a thing that I was trying to do with, like, no, she's nobody's adjunct. She's,
right.
You know, but it was deemed as like, it changed the basics of too much, and
Gotcha.
and people really, really, really love Mar-Vell, and we didn't want it to be perceived as like trying to remove him from the picture.
Right.
So it ended up staying. But yeah, just as a sort of interesting side note, that was where that was going to go.
Cool.
That's the only time I think I've ever been told. No.
That's awesome. Questions from the audience, because I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure. Yes. Yeah.
In the first arc of Captain Marvel, I noticed that in a lot of ways it seemed to be about nostalgia and history and your idols and reading and exploring your idols. And I was just wondering, well, how you decided to go in that direction, what you were thinking when you did that.
Well, part of it was, so I wanted to talk about legacy. I wanted to talk about like the shoulders on which she stands, right? And I also, if you go back, and I have it with me actually, because Jerry Conway, who wrote it, is here, and I want to get it signed. But I have Ms. Marvel #1, and if you go back and read the early Ms. Marvel series, she is an overtly feminist character. Like, if you think my stuff is heavy-handed, you ain't seen nothing. I am subtle by comparison. She writes for Woman magazine, you know, and she's like, "Daddy, you don't think I can do this because I'm a girl," you know. I mean, like, it is that. And there are a couple, especially when she's working for Woman, it is seriously like it is Gloria Steinem fanfic, you know. And so, like, see, the big glasses and the hair,
Yeah.
it is. And I wanted to bring her back to kind of an iconoclastic place because in Civil War, for really good reasons, they had made her very much a law and order character. She had been a good soldier. She was like letter of the law, and she did some really indefensible stuff during Civil War. And I understood why. But I didn't feel like if she was to carry her own book, I could root for that woman. So I wanted to bring her back to her swagger. You know, I wanted to bring her back to bucking the system. I wanted to bring her back to kind of the adrenaline junkie. And I also wanted to write about, so like feminism is about fairness. And superheroes, I think, our ideals are about fairness and what is right and what is just. And I wanted to go back to some of these stories of things that were grossly unfair for these women aviators. And you know, the WASPs of World War II were real women. They gave their lives in service to their country. It wasn't until 1977 that they were recognized as veterans. When they died in service, they had to take up collections from their comrades to get their bodies home. They couldn't be, they couldn't be buried with the flag. Thankfully, most of their families said, I don't know who we're streaming this to.
Yeah.
What you would say with that hand gesture, and buried them with the flags anyway. The Mercury 13, that was never an official program. Those were the best women pilots in the country. The scientists who were behind the astronaut program felt that the women actually would make better astronauts than the men of the Mercury program. For a lot of reasons. They tested better in everything but brute strength. They handled cold better, isolation better. You know, it's not like a man versus, but there was no reason that they weren't as capable. They were just as good of pilots, but they were not allowed into the program because they were not jet pilots. Was the official reason? It wasn't because of their gender. It was because they weren't jet pilots. Well, the only way you could be a jet pilot was to be an Air Force pilot, which you couldn't be because of your gender. So it was like, and the real reason was, and this came from the Vice President's office, the real reason was that they just felt that if this was too risky a program, and if men died, they would be considered heroes and martyrs, and if a woman died in space exploration, the program would be shut down because patriarchy, I guess. I don't know. And yeah, right? So I figured this book was going to get 6 issues. This was my chance to talk about this stuff, and I was getting it in before anybody could cancel it. So.
Guys, I wish we could go on for another hour because this is awesome. We have to wrap it up. But Kelly Sue, thank you so much.
Thank you, Blair.
Please, a huge round of applause for Kelly Sue DeConnick. This is awesome.
All right.
It was a old lady fist bump.
Yes, I know.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. And there are a couple more panels coming up for the rest of the day. So please stick around. Come visit. This is my sultry.